else who's remote. So the remote people are myself, Councillor Davis. Councillor Davis, yes, I think you probably have to say can you hear and see me?
I can see and hear you, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Crockett.
I can see and hear you.
And then in person, we have Councillor Harvey, Councillor Toynbee and Councillor Chowns. Apologies we have from Councillor Tyler and Councillor Harrington. Going then down to Cabinet support members. Do we have Councillor Bartlett? No, not today. Councillor Hardwick?
Yes, Leader, good afternoon. I can see and hear you clearly.
Thank you. Councillor Kath Hay?
Yes, thanks, Leader. I can see and hear you.
I don't think Councillor Selden is with us. Councillor Peter Ginman?
Yes, good afternoon, Leader. I can hear and see.
Thank you. Councillor Watson is currently actually not cabinet support. So she is not on the list. Then the group leaders, Councillor James. I did see his name. Yes, Councillor James, you are there, but I think you still have to say.
Oh, yes, sorry. I didn't unmute myself. I guess I can see and hear you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Lester is replaced by Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Leader. I can see and hear you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Matthews.
Yes, Leader, I can see and hear you.
Councillor Fagan.
Afternoon, Leader. I can see and hear you.
And I'm not sure who is representing the Independents of Herefordshire. Is that you, Councillor Hay or Councillor Ginman?
I've been asked to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. And then the scrutiny chairs, Councillor Howells.
Good afternoon, Leader. Yes, I can see and hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Swinglehurst.
Good afternoon, Leader. I can see and hear you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Alyssa. We also have a number of officers attending who will be introduced as they're called upon. So if I can formally now open the meeting, the agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streaming the meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and making a recording. To ensure that recording quality is maintained, please speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum. Microphones should be muted when you're not speaking, and please ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. For members of the public who may be watching, just to explain that we have 3 councillors present at Plough Lane who constitute the quorum for this meeting. I am remote today on Zoom, and also we have added a feature this time so that members who are present in person in Plough Lane are also on this Zoom call, and I hope that is a satisfactory arrangement for everybody. So people can film, photograph and record our public meetings provided it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. As we move through the agenda, in addition to discussion by Cabinet members, I will invite group leaders or their representatives in turn to provide views and questions from their group on each item. Where appropriate, I will also call on scrutiny chairpersons to comment on behalf of their committee. Voting will be undertaken by a show of hands in the room. Only Cabinet members physically in attendance may vote. So first of all, apologies for absence. These are from Councillor Harrington and Councillor Tyler. Are there any other apologies?
The only other apology
I've had, Leader, are from Councillor Lester, and you've noted that Councillor Shaw is substituting for him today.
Thank you, Sarah. Declarations of interest. Are there any Schedule 1, Schedule 2 or other interest for items on the agenda today? I see none. Thank you. Minutes to approve and sign the minutes of the meeting held on 23rd of September and the 30th of September 2021. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer. Cabinet members, are you content the minutes are an accurate record? So if the 3 of you could vote, I guess by showing your hands. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Item 4 is to receive any questions from members of the public. We have received some questions for this meeting. Our response has been published as a supplement. Those members of the public who have submitted questions have the opportunity to submit a written supplementary or to join the meeting to ask their questions live. The first questioner is Mr. Wilmont. Sarah, do we have a supplemental question?
No, I've not received any supplemental question from Mr. Wilmont.
Thank you. And from Mr. Mackay, we do have a supplemental question. Would you like to read that out?
Yes, Mr. Mackay asked that some time ago, the information regarding known anomalies was taken offline, and he wonders if this also has a new location that he's not aware of. And if we could confirm that ways approved for submission on first definitive map as CRF or CRB by parish meeting, approved by Rural District Council, but shown by Heritage Council as FP or BR, without any explanation to detriment of other users, are included known anomalies, and if not, arrange for them to be included so that they may be subject to investigation in the same manner as other known anomalies as part of the unresourced projects. Reference BBLP Annual Plan Annex 11 of 2020-21, acknowledging them as items to be addressed to avoid them being overlooked.
Okay, this would be for Councillor Harrington, who is not available today. So Councillor Harrington will provide a written response to that question to Mr. Mackay. And the third was from Christine Price from Health Watch Herefordshire. I don't know whether she has sent a supplemental.
No, I've not received any supplementary question, Linda.
Okay, thank you very much. So then to item 5, there haven't been any questions from councillors. So we can move then rapidly on to item 6, which is the improvement plan for children and families. And this is to endorse the draft strategic improvement plan, which is Appendix 1, and the draft operational plan is Appendix 2. This begins on page 19 of the agenda pack. This has been quite extensively discussed and amended, polished up over some time. So I will hand over, if I may, to Councillor Toynbee to introduce this topic.
Thank you, Leader. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm sorry I haven't got my Zoom camera on because I don't trust my laptop today. Good afternoon, everybody. As the Leader said, this item is to formally endorse our Children and Families Strategic Improvement Plan. And the recommendations are that Cabinet notes the activity undertaken to inform and develop our strategic and operational plans, and that Cabinet endorse the strategic plan accepted by the independently chaired Improvement Board on the 11th of October 2021, in order that it can be presented to the Department for Education in compliance with the non-statutory improvement notice. So the key document for us today is this strategic improvement plan. We also have in front of us the operational improvement plan, which is in more detail, and for that we're being asked to note the direction of travel. It's a more detailed plan and it's still being developed, and that will also in due time be presented to the DFE, to Ofsted. So as we all know, there are lots of threads and layers to improvement. So it's very useful to have them all brought together in this plan. It was very good to see it endorsed by the Improvement Board on October the 11th. And that was an important step forward on our improvement path. We are well along the path, and today is another important stage, as when this plan is endorsed, it will be published, and it will then belong to all of us, members, families, staff and partners. I want to mention 3 areas that have been given an added focus since the first draft of this plan. Following feedback from staff and members, and there have been a lot of opportunities to provide that feedback, and I'm very grateful for that. Firstly, we have increased the legal support for our staff in the Children's Directorate, and I know that's something that colleagues had as a priority. Communications, another priority. Communications within the Directorate are much more frequent and meaningful now. And we also have more HR support for the Directorate, which means we can have the conversations that we need to have with staff members and that they're receiving the support they deserve. And we're already feeling the benefit of all these three measures, and reflections on them are still being fed into the operational plan, which is a live document. So a lot of work has gone into this plan. I'm very grateful to everyone who's been part of putting it together, and that's been a wide range of people. You all know how hard our staff have been working over the past 6 months, supporting our children and families every day, on top of doing work that is high pressure, and particularly high pressure at the moment. And I'm very grateful that they've taken the time to share their ideas and suggestions. So a huge thank you to them. As far as input from councillors in Herefordshire Council is concerned, all members have had many updates, many briefings on this plan and on the progress we're making. And I'm very grateful to Darryl and Paul for how very available they've made themselves. And they're both with us this afternoon. Members have had many opportunities to feed into this plan. So today is our opportunity to move forward together with a common purpose. As far as cabinet endorsement is concerned, as you can see, colleagues, this plan fits perfectly into the county plan and our administration's priorities. Since we formed our administration in 2019, we found quite a few things that need putting right. And this is central to that work of getting the council back on track, and our social values and our quality of life, and our tackling inequality. So I trust that you, cabinet colleagues, agree that it's invaluable to have these plans to help us focus and move forwards, and that you're happy to note the work already undertaken on our strategic and operational plans, and that you'll join me in endorsing our strategic improvement plan so that we can keep up our positive momentum and focus firmly on moving forwards. Thank you.
Councillor Toynbee, do you want Mr. Freeman to say anything at this point, or just wait for comments from cabinet members?
I think wait for comments. Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. I'll just toss up a very gentle to start with, if I may, Darryl. Big issue for us is retaining staff, encouraging them to see Herefordshire as the place to come and work and train and live. You're very much aware of that. The plan deals with it, but perhaps just top line, you could explain a little bit about what we're doing to encourage the staff.
Certainly, thank you, Leader. So we, as Councillor Toynbee said in her introduction, we have a very dedicated group of permanent staff in Herefordshire, many of whom have worked for the council for many years and who are embracing the change that we're working to bring about through this improvement plan. Clearly, change has been unsettling, and the High Court judgment earlier this year was particularly difficult for some of our colleagues. Some of the support that we've put in place in recent months has included a raft of wellbeing support processes, such as forums and opportunities to discuss with peers and or senior managers. We're working across the council and with our HR colleagues to look at the package of support that's available to children's social workers, but not just social workers, to a range of different posts within a children's service such as ours. Recruitment and retention is not just a Herefordshire challenge, it's a national challenge and a West Midlands regional challenge, and we're very focused on being competitive, but actually being committed to Herefordshire being an employer of choice and a place where we would want future colleagues to come and join us and settle in Herefordshire and make a career with Herefordshire Children's Services.
Thank you. Anybody else like to comment from Cabinet? Councillor Harvey?
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'd like to draw members' attention to the resource implications section of the main report on this, paragraph 19 onwards, particularly to the breakdown of costs that we have at the top of page 23 in the agenda pack, which breaks down the cost of the work outline across this and next financial years. We are funding this from earmarked reserves because this programme is in addition to our approved budget framework. And I'd just like to have confirmation as to which of the earmarked reserves this funding is coming from, if I could please.
So the total shown on page 23 is 5.2 million. And during the 1920 year end, we set aside 5.3 million specifically for children's improvements. So that's the earmarked reserve that's funding the 5.2.
Excellent. So so that does tally with the funding that we have set aside specifically for improvement work in children's. That's very good to hear. I'd also like to draw members' attention to paragraph 21, which signals the possibility of some additional financial support from the Department for Education, which I understand we're very hopeful for a positive outcome of.
Yes, I don't know whether the Chief Executive would like to comment on that, because I think there is some good news on that funding. Paul, are you able to speak? Are you?
I don't believe we've had any confirmation.
It's not to work with you, Paul. Josie, do you want to explain what has happened?
We did put a bid in for a DFE grant. I'm not aware we had visual notification of the success of that bid, unless Darryl, you had something.
No, I think, sorry, Josie, I think you and Paul have the same problem with your laptops. They need to be adapted.
Apologies.
Jen is on the way to the rescue, Leader. I can see her.
Okay, well, we'll come back to that question in a moment. Davis, did you want to comment?
Just leave it muted the whole time.
Okay. Yeah, there is. It's just a couple of things, really. Really grateful, Councillor Toynbee, for your openness around all of this, and including all members, regardless of whether they have a position on a committee or not, into what is going on. I've been really impressed at also the ability to do it outside of normal working hours, so that every single member can attend those briefings. So really grateful to you for setting all of that up. I think if anybody's watching, or if the press are looking, I think one of the best things that they can do is have a look at the plan on the page. I think it's really easy to read, it's really understandable, and I think that what's within it, there's nothing missing, but that's from us looking at it. So whether or not a member of the public sees it and thinks, actually, you haven't thought about this, this and this, let us know. But within the actual delivery plan, it's great to have targets set for the first time, to be able to say, by this date, we will have done X, Y, and Z, and to hold us to account for it. But Darryl, I've got a question for you, and it's come from a number of residents that have spoken to me, a number of friends who are genuinely distraught at some of the things that we're having to do for improvement, and they really want to make a difference. And they ask me, what can I do? Now I say the statements, have a look at the delivery plan. If we're not on target, ask us questions, make sure you're holding us to account. But what more could members of the public who want to help do to help us on this improvement journey?
Thank you, Councillor Davis. I think that's a really quite exciting question in many respects, because our focus for these past few months has been very much internal and with immediate stakeholders, and looking at our core improvement plan. And obviously within that plan, there's a longer term and very bold ambition from the council for creating a child-centred Herefordshire. And I think what I'd like us to do is think about how we can engage with some of the constituents and community groups that you're referring to, and harness that energy and that enthusiasm for taking the steps that we're outlining in this plan onto a kind of a more bold and ambitious level. In the short term, I'd be happy to have a conversation with you about how specifically in relation to perhaps some of the specific requests. But I think the idea that we can harness community interest and community energy into that child-centred Herefordshire plan going forward is really quite an exciting prospect.
Thank you. No further questions, Leader.
Thank you. Paul, are you able to talk now about the 1.7 million?
Yeah, I can. Apologies for that. I think I was trying to use the wrong microphone and use the microphone in the room. But yes, we've been working with colleagues at the Department for Education about some additional funding support to secure additional capacity around our work around assessments, to relieve some of the pressure on some of the assessments team, to provide learning and development to our frontline social workers, and to extend some of the signs of safety training and providing 2 practice leads teams in the short term to work on the modifications that are needed in terms of the practice arrangements that have been put into place, and learn from the experience and the outcomes of the reviews of the open cases which are currently undertaken. We've had some very positive conversations with the Department for Education. At this stage, we're waiting for formal confirmation of the outcome of that work. We submitted a funding bid for £1.7 million. All the indications are positive at this stage, but I think, to be fair, we are still waiting for formal confirmation that that has been approved, and that the Department for Education are working closely with us, as they have done so far, and continue to support our improvement journey.
Thank you. Any other, Councillor Chowns? I think you had your hand up.
I really just wanted to say, sorry, I made exactly the same mistake. It's completely Pavlovian reaction to unmute. Okay, so in this room, I don't unmute. I really just wanted to say, thank you to Councillor Toynbee, but especially to all of the officers who've done so much work on this plan, and everybody who's kind of on the front line of working on children's services. I think what we have got now is this real sense of unity across the council. Everybody's focused on making things better for children in Herefordshire. This is particularly focused on making things better for the children that we have particular responsibility for. Emma's question highlighted. We also want to, translate that energy into a real focus on making it a county really centred around children's needs. So, doing that frontline work for kids is the hardest job in the world, I think. My mum did it, and it's really so important. So I just want to pay tribute to everybody who's been doing that. And I really feel that we are in so much better a position now because we've recognised the very real challenges that are faced, and we've got this plan in place to take us forward. So I feel hopeful about the future for our kids.
Yes, I guess the hard work starts, well, it's already started, actually. We've been at it for several months, but once we've got this plan here, we can work on it. I'll save most of my comments, if I may, till after we've approved this, and I'll go, I think, I can't see real hands going up, but I will move on, I think, if I may, to the scrutiny chair, Councillor Howells.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yeah, I've got some points to make, but I'd like, first of all, the comments that several have made about how impressed it is, the very great deal of hard work that's been put into by Paul and the officers team, and obviously Diana and the cabinet team. And there's a lot of great details and thought gone into it, clearly, and overall very impressive. So as good scrutiny could do, if there's 9 great things, we don't talk about those. We say, what's the one thing that maybe should be looked at a little bit more? So constructively, I've got a few points, please put in that context. And it's a few exception points that I think we need to look at from the point of view of scrutiny. First of all, we didn't receive any papers on the improvement plan. And as Jenny has said to Paul on our behalf, we would normally expect that scrutiny could have looked like a plan like this before it went to cabinet. We haven't had a chance to do that. What made it more ironic even that she and I were both booked in for an absolutely excellent 2-day at Warwick University, organised by the LGA, fully funded, Leadership Essential for Scrutiny course, which was really brilliant. But that was also the 2 days that members were briefed. So the 2 people that probably really wanted to receive it didn't have the briefing, which is ironic, unfortunate timing. As it happened, Jenny wasn't very well, so she was able to make to make one of them. But I think it's fair to say that, and we both made the comment, that we don't think scrutiny is really yet fully integrated into this whole programme. That's one example. You know, we weren't able, for example, to say to our fellow committee members, look, this is the improvement plan, we've had a briefing, have you got any thoughts of what you'd like me to say at this meeting today? And I think that could have been better managed. So, and we've also made the point that, you know, we're feeling a bit managed at the moment rather than consider, if you like, our thoughts proactively. And we think we're being quite reactive at the moment. One example is that, and I know we've had this discussion, but we're not on the improvement board meetings, and we don't necessarily feel that we should be contributing, but we should be there participating. And the NGA support us on that it would be good if we were actually there listening. We would then be seen to be more integrated, we feel, and therefore probably at the right moment consulted about how scrutiny should be contributing. So I think that's a general point. I do think we need to do more work on that. And I also think that we've got some more work to do on page 7, paragraph 2 of on the decision document, for example. It talks about children and young people being considered from the beginning in the whole process, and yet we've got some way to go to show that's actually happening. We've had some offers, for example, of members of the public to get involved in helping us give the story of what it's like to be receiving it. And as you know, we've been described as being innovative, as saying traditionally scrutiny is very top down and we want to make it bottom up. And it just illustrates the cultural challenge in doing that. We all, I think, intuitively agree that's right, but there are sensitivity issues, more legal issues, and we're pretty damn slow in actually taking that up, frankly. So we're a bit disappointed, but more importantly, the members of the public who are quite excited by the improvement plan because they know we've got to do it, but disappointed that we haven't taken up some of those offers and moved more quickly as they would like to see us do. And we're sort of putting them on a holding pattern, really. And that isn't a very good start to show that we want to involve young people and their carers, parents, and indeed workers as well. So I think that's something we should take up. So we don't think actually we're up to steam yet in scrutiny being effectively involved in the whole process. And I've had 3 comments from members of the public which might be worth taking on board. One was that SEND is only a very passive mention. It needs to be revisited, we think. There isn't sufficient reference to SEND educational needs in the plan. There's a lots of mention too on talk community and how that might be involved, but the feedback we've got is, well, yeah, but there's not very much detail on saying how talk community might be used and would help to make the improvement plan work. So perhaps that's another area to look at. And the particular person I spoke to said there's no mention of the children's disability team or the child in need plan. So there are perhaps some issues like that that could be looked at to add some detail that would help and give a bit extra reassurance to the public who are pretty good at picking up these things. As I said, those are constructive. Most of it's great stuff, but I hope you'd agree our role is to pick the few things that actually perhaps could be looked at in a bit more detail. Thank you, Leader.
So I'm a bit concerned to hear you saying that you haven't been consulted on this plan. Have I got that right or wrong? Because I thought that you'd see the earlier versions of this document because it's been around a time.
Yeah, not the actual detail of it. You know, and as I've said before, we have, and I'm very grateful for that. And it does help regular meetings with Paul and Darryl every week on an update. But it just so happened, I think the timing was for us to be able to look at the detail of the plan, given we were away on a course at the time. We could have been talking with our committee members and getting greater feedback. So I think timing was part of the issue. But I think both Jenny and I would agree, we don't feel really we've had enough view of the detail of the plan. And we saw the strategy of the 5 pillars and the overall view of what the construction of the plan might look like, but the detail not. And as I said, we thought that maybe that could have come to scrutiny to look at before it came to cabinet, which we understand is what would be the normal course of events. So it's constructive criticism, but I think it's worth note of.
Yes, well, you did begin your comment saying you're 90%.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I just want to reiterate that.
So we've obviously got a little bit of more work to do, I think, on scrutiny and working out what that role is. And Paul, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I think if I may, I think it'd be appropriate to respond to Councillor Howell's comments there about involvement and consultation. And yes, there's always, learning to be done when you get to the end of the process. But I think, to be fair, we should reflect on the kind of intensity of the work that's been put in along the way, and the workshops which were provided on three levels, really. First of all, the cabinet member workshop with regards to the improvement plan, and there's a specific workshop for all members to attend across a range of sessions, and then similarly a session for members of the scrutiny committee to attend. And that was about the role and purpose of the improvement plan, and to share the arrangements for how that was to be structured and the specific priorities and content. And I think, to be fair, the officers who attended those got a good deal of information and feedback which was put into the plan, and a number of things were amended and changed and improved. And I think some specific examples that came from scrutiny at that time. And what we were particularly, I think, pleased with the response from members of the last two briefing sessions that we held last week on the 20th and 21st of October. We had carefully shared the final draft of the plan with members ahead of it being published, to be considered by Cabinet. And myself and Darryl and the team took a good deal of care to walk members through the scope of the plan and the priorities within the plan. As Councillor Howell said, unfortunately that coincided with some specific training that we had arranged for Councillor Howell and the Vice Chairman to support their role in scrutiny, which they were keen to undertake. That was unfortunate, and I know that they were disappointed that they couldn't attend. Just a clash of timescales. I think the Vice Chair was able to attend the session on the 21st and input feedback. But I would like to think that we have done as much as we can in terms of sharing the final draft in advance of it coming for approval to the Improvement Board and for sign-off by the Cabinet today. The next stage with scrutiny is a meeting with the DFE advisor and the LGA advisor, who I have asked to spend some time with the Chair and Vice Chair to go through the improvement plan along with Darryl and work through where the appropriate areas for scrutiny may wish to work, but also take account of the wishes of the Chair and the Vice Chair of the areas that they wish to involve scrutiny. So we kind of get a bringing together of where scrutiny can have its greatest impact and add value to the process. So there is still work to do, and there's still an opportunity for scrutiny to have their say in terms of the programme which they adopt. And I think, as Darryl would rightly reflect, this is the starting point for the improvement plan. It's the detail which is really important, and the detail, has yet to be worked through, and that's where the opportunity here is. And I think I could just ask Darryl to say a little bit more about that, and that will give the full picture.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, absolutely. The document is to be considered to be a live document. It will change over time. It will flex and it will respond. And I look forward to it getting a really good airing at a scrutiny committee sometime very soon. And that the output from those conversations will inform the next iteration, the next version, as it starts to evolve. So yeah, I look forward to having those conversations with you, Councillor Howells, and with the scrutiny committee. The points you raised around SEND, talk community and children with disabilities, subject to, as Paul said, subject to confirmation of the outcome of our bid for grant funding from the DFE. Our proposal is that some of that money is used to pump prime and develop the work around talk community and how we develop that right help, right time strategy. And I very much hope that councillors and the scrutiny committee will have a role in that conversation too, as well as citizens and the wider stakeholders. SEND, you're right, doesn't get much of a mention here, but is really covered through a kind of a separate plan. So there is an SEND plan, and obviously the government in the relatively near future will be publishing a new SEND framework. We're waiting for that really before we start to apply some additional measures, but it will certainly get more of a mention in the operational plan going forward. And yes, in the work that we're doing at the moment to further develop the operational plan, children with disabilities certainly gets much more of a mention. And again, I look forward to bringing the operational plan to scrutiny committee.
Thank you, Leader. If I can just quickly follow up on that, I totally want to recognise that Paul and Darryl have been totally responsive to the concerns that we've raised, just questions we've asked. I mean, they're just obviously part of the learning process. And as Paul said, as a result of the representation Jenny made on our behalf, because she was able to go to one of the briefings, fixed fortune really, she'd rather be in the leadership course, obviously, but she was able to attend that meeting and we've had a chat about it, so it's quite useful. But as a direct result of raising the sort of similar questions I've just asked, as Paul rightly says, we've got a meeting with Gladys and Paul, and actually Claire Burgess of the LGA was offered to come on board as well, just to address those points to make sure we get them fully as integrated as we all would require them to be. So thanks to Paul and Darryl for that.
I'm on mute, sorry about that. We'll move on then to the group leaders, and my practice is to do it in alphabetical order, but then to shift it one along for the second time. So the person who starts this time does not start next time. So the order is Councillor Fagan, Councillor James, Councillor Matthews, Councillor Shaw, and then it was going to be Councillor Wilding, but Councillor Jimman, you've jumped in. Yeah, you should come after Councillor James, Councillor Jimman. So first of all,
what an honour.
Councillor Fagan.
Thank you, Leader. And on behalf of the Greens, we just want to say that we welcome this plan, and particularly that we put young people at the heart of all we do. And I think in terms of our sort of social values, valuing children as key members of our society and making sure that every decision that we take has the impact of that decision on them at the heart of it is a really important step. There's obviously a lot of work that's gone into this plan, and there's a lot of work to do, but we feel like we're actually sort of in a good position to actually move forward and make sure that this plan is implemented and impacts on the children of Herefordshire for the very best, with the very best outcomes.
Thank you, Councillor Fagan. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. As a plan goes, there's little I can fault in it. It's the operational part that we need to be concerned about. We've seen good plans before, but it's the operation on the way in which it operates. You know, the jury is still out as to whether that will take place. You can have all the best plans in the world, and yet unless you have the right people and enough people operating it with the right attitude, it doesn't work. And as I said, we've produced plans before. But we are where we are at the moment. I hope it will work, but we shall see.
Okay, so Councillor James, if I may, I'll respond to that a little bit. I think you'll agree with me that it's vital that the problems that we have in children's services, which have been around since at least 2012 and probably much earlier, that they be addressed. I have sought to engage with you in the hope that by having a dialogue with you, it might be possible to show a united front in addressing these issues. In particular, I've sent you 2 emails asking for a meeting, to which I have not received any response. I've also asked you publicly to let me know of specific concerns that you might have, and you have not contacted me. At the last council meeting, you asked a question, the tenor of which was, which I felt and others felt as well, suggested a certain bad practice was going on in the council and being hidden. This has been dealt with, and your concerns shown to be entirely unfounded. On Monday of this week, the council was informed that they had every prospect of receiving a grant for 1.75 million. Okay, it hasn't we haven't had the letter yet, but that funding should be coming forward. And this will help in our improvement journey. And that claim has been approved in its entirety. This, I believe, is a vote of confidence by the DfE and the new minister in what we are doing. And I particularly like to commend the interim director and his team for writing this application in such a quick space of time and so successfully. So I would ask you, Councillor James, to join me in commending this administration, first for the serious way in which it is addressing the issues, leaving no stone unturned, especially given that you have said many times that you have been aware of this issue for a long time. Second, I would ask you to provide an appropriate public response to the allegations made in your question to Council. And I would ask for a public statement, given your question was made in a public arena, when actually a better route might have been for you to have spoken to the Chief Executive and asked them questions. Thirdly, I ask you to offer support and encouragement to the Chief Executive, to the Interim Director of Children's Services, and all social workers who are working under very challenging conditions to care for children in the county. With the adoption of this plan, we have reached a watershed moment, Councillor James. It is not too late to show the people of Herefordshire that the council is united in its wish to put things right for children in our care. I'm sure you'll wish to respond to those comments.
Can I say that I received an email from you suggesting a meeting? I received an email with a date and time from the Chief Executive's aide, which I was already having a meeting at. There was no inquiry as to whether I was available on that particular date. It was just more or less a summons. I informed them that I already was holding a meeting with members of my group at that time. I received no response. I received an apology from the secretary or the PA to the Chief Executive, and nothing further was heard after that particular point. As to the plan, we'll wait and see whether it works. Some of us have seen plans, well, very good plans before, but operationally, it hasn't changed anything. And those that have laboured in social care area of children's services, many of them have left because those plans haven't been fulfilled over the years. And we will wait and see as to whether that will happen in the next year. Further than that, as I said earlier, the plan is a good plan, but it's what happens with that plan that counts in the end. There are many, many, many families who are very, very angry about what has happened, not only over the last 10 years, but also over the last 2 years. So don't count your chickens before they hatch. Let's wait and see and hope that this will make a big improvement. But plans on their own do nothing.
Thank you, Councillor James. I just wonder whether you'd like to commend the social workers for their hard work for the council. They're in a very difficult role they have to fulfil, and they need the support from us as councillors.
Yes, and they haven't had it over the last 6 months. That's the reason why so many have left.
Yeah, well, okay, we move on. The next speaker, Councillor Ginman.
Thank you, Leader, for the opportunity to speak. I'd like to be constructive. This is a plan that's had to take time to come together. It's been done extraordinarily quickly, very well by those involved in incredibly difficult circumstances. And I think it should be on behalf of all on council, irrespective of group, party or anything else, to be positive and help to make this work and to get behind it 101% if one's allowed an extra percent over 100. The point being that at the center of this is children. We adults can have our arguments and our disputes and our discussions, but the center of this are children and ensuring that children are cared for, loved, looked after in the manner we would wish to see that happen. And those people on the front line dealing with that, whether they be teachers or social workers, demand and should have freely given from us their support. This is a start of a journey. It's a journey that's long overdue. We wouldn't wish to have started from here, kicked by the law courts, but we've started. We're making that journey. We will learn, we will get things wrong. Tell us when we do, make sure we learn from that so that we can make this journey a really positive one and not a long one. This is something that needs tackling in the shortest possible way, shortest terms. So my thanks to all involved in writing the plan. My hope that all councillors will get behind it. I hope we will all say a very big thank you to the staff from the bottom of the rankings right the way through, because it's those in direct contact who need to know they've got our support in every way and that doors are open. We're here, we can be contacted, and we'll be positive about it. We will make sure that any messages that come to us will be passed on, not sat there to suddenly come back years later. That is of no value to anybody. So I wish everybody well with this plan. Look forward to the next part of it. Look forward to the implementation. Look forward to hearing scrutiny's comments, which I'm sure will be constructive, because that's what we all need to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jimman. Councillor Matthews and then Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. It's a very comprehensive report and certainly a step in the right direction. It's obviously early days and a lot of work to be done, and everyone must work together whenever possible to improve the situation. And also, so I'd like to thank all the officers and everyone that put a lot of work into this report, and also for the whoever submitted the report to government for the grant. That's great news, because all these things cost an awful lot of money, and we've had to spend a lot owing to the failings over recent years. I'd also like to thank the interim Darrell and Chief Executive for the meetings you've had with members. I found those very, very positive, and I shall be asking you, Darrell, in a minute, if you could inform us that, because I thought that members brought up some very positive and some very progressive issues and points that they put forward. Can you assure us that you listen to members, because members are they're right into the deep of it. They meet their constituents, they know what's going on, they know what the views are. So we should feed it back to you, and I hope you can confirm that you will listen to it. So yes, as I say, it's a sound first step. You've certainly got our full support, and yes, we've got to all work together. But we mustn't get away, Leader, from the fact that we mustn't scorn on people who feel that there are some, shortcomings and sort of basically come down on them for making their points and their views. After all, we're all elected members, and if they feel that something isn't quite as it should be, hang on, democracy is democracy, and they should be free to be able to say. But as far as the true independents are concerned, a very positive move, a very comprehensive report, and I'm glad to see that you see that a lot of the issues that have been the weaknesses within this department for years have been constantly highlighted, and I'm not just blowing my own trumpet, certainly by me, and members who have served for a few years know that I've brought this up constantly, issues like moving in at a very early stage on new cases to try and keep the children in the family environment. And it took me 16 months constantly on before we got that system adopted. It's been adopted now, and I'm told it's working very well. So a lot of good and positive thinking can come from elected members. A lot of us have been about there for a while. So can you confirm, Darrell, that when members put forward ideas and proposals, that you will carefully consider them and take them forward accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews, and I can certainly confirm that. I think members have played a really important role in the development of the plan so far. Really appreciated the feedback and your experience that you've brought to the process of developing this plan. And we absolutely committed to carry on those member briefings on a regular basis and to report back to Cabinet and full Council on a regular basis.
Thank you.
Thank you, Darryl. And finally, Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you for to the Chief Executive, the Interim Director, and all the officers and the Cabinet member for this plan. A very comprehensive document, indeed. I'd like to, from our group, just make a slight philosophical comment, and then I think I've got three comments really relating to some of the financial issues within the plan, which I think, as has already been said, is a plan which will evolve in time, and possibly these points can be taken up then by scrutiny or by the plan authors in due time. Firstly, the philosophical one, and I'm reflecting the viewers of my group, so please don't shoot the messenger. It seems to be the topic today. The phrase "creating a child-centred county" sits uneasy with some members of the group. They would have preferred creating a family-centred county, in that it's our ambition, or should be our ambition, because children and young people are at the heart of the family. Now, I guess that's semantics, possibly. I'm just wondering how it resonates more widely with people in the county at large, and it's perhaps a point that needs to be tackled in terms of the way the plan's being explained to the wider audience. So that's a philosophical point. I was noted, page 8 of Appendix 1, we're talking about embedding phase 3 and embedding the change, April 23 to 24. And this seems to be uncosted at the moment, that there's no contingency in the plan for it. And then returning to paragraph 20 of the report itself, there's nothing in the cost of the project beyond 2022-23. And I'm not sure that's really realistic. Are we really believing that by April 2023, 17 months away, there'll be no need for any of these activities to continue? Probably not. And the operational plan already has activities ending on the 31st of March 2023. And I suspect, being worldly wise perhaps, that some of these may slip. So I think we probably need to look in due course at the revenue implications for 22-23. And I did also pick up on Councillor Harvey's comment in respect of page 21. I wasn't clear with what was written, whether this was further funding for the project or to replace some earmarked reserve funding. Now it's clear from what the Chief Executive said, it's further funding for the project. And again, from a point of view of how that is then spent, I would expect to see then in an iteration how that spending is going to be allocated over the 3 years. Because at the moment, you're going to get the money, but I don't suppose you really have cabinet approval to spend it. And that needs to be addressed. So those are the 3 points. The only other final point, this is a really big project. It's a complex project. No two ways about it. It's a project not involving bricks and mortar, but involving people and children and ways of working and all that. It would be great if we had some sort of Gantt chart with the milestones, the dates, the resource and the activity all mapped on it. given it's such a complex project, that type of approach, I'm sure, would simplify for all of us the tasks and the resources required to deliver them. But on the whole, I'm sure I speak for all of the Conservative group to say that we will certainly be getting behind the project, and we'll be getting behind particularly the social workers at the coalface who are going to have to deliver this, and look forward to seeing some positive results. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Mr. Freeman, do you want to respond to those observations?
Thank you, Leader. As a social worker by profession, I shudder slightly at the mention of Gantt charts, but I can assure you, Councillor Shaw, that we've got a very, very skilled and capable project management team here, and they're also pushing me to start to introduce some Gantt charts, but or perhaps to a limited audience. But yeah, there's a lot of infrastructure and planning going into making sure we stay on track as far as we're able, and to make sure that we know where we're not on track. The DFE grant, as we said, so objective confirmation is for specific elements of our improvement plan, and which would need to be spent and have the impact that we want by the end of this current financial year. It's a time limited grant, and that's really to help us to deliver some of the improvement faster than we would otherwise be able. The issue of funding in future years is obviously a topic that we would need to bring back. So certainly something under consideration, and that we would need to bring back through the appropriate channels once we finish that piece of work.
Thank you. I'll now, I think, Councillor Hay, who's Cabinet support for Councillor Toynbee, I think you wanted to say one or two things.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yes, obviously in my role as Cabinet Support Member, I have been able to be in a number of briefings to do with the improvement plan. And so I would really like to say that from my point of view, I believe we now are at a point where we have the right culture, the right people, and the right attitude to move forward with the improvements that we need to do. And I'm very confident of that. Obviously, it's been said many times this afternoon, but I'd like to reiterate thanks to Councillor Toynbee and the officer team for all of their hard work and due diligence to get us to this point. And it has been rightly said, there's lots more to do, but at this point, I think it's very important that we continue to work with partners, because we've had a question this afternoon from Health Watch, which is really good to see, and they want to be engaged in the process, and I think that can be rolled out to the wider communities to make sure that everyone's having their voice heard. And we've heard about the SEND provision and how that can also be looked at further, and I totally agree with what Councillor Howell said on that. So really, the purpose of this report coming to Cabinet this afternoon is to endorse its submission to the DFE. So on that basis, I would like to put my full support behind that. I won't add much more because the plan has been through a rigorous timetable of consultation. I mean, really, all I would like to say is that I would like to thank all of the social work staff and their teams for their continued hard work and commitment to their roles during a period of transition and really focused attention. We have a loyal and dedicated workforce who will be supported on this continued journey of improvement. I mean, the input from staff members into the improvement plan is really important, and it has been obviously mentioned today that staff will be supported in whatever way they can be along the process. So I will leave it there and say obviously that I do commend this report to be supported today.
Thank you, Councillor Hay. Councillor Toynbee, do you want to say anything before I put this to the vote?
Just very briefly, thank you. Just to thank everybody for their comments and pick up on just a couple of things. As far as we will wait and see is concerned, we don't have to wait and see, because all the the mechanisms for giving us assurance as we go along that we are hitting the targets we want to hit are built into these plans. The mechanisms are built in for assurance, and we haven't had that properly before. So it does feel different, and I'm confident that that's going to work, and we will receive assurances as we go along. As far as talk community is concerned, I agree. I think I'm looking forward to more work being done on that. There's huge potential there, and we do need to do more work on how can we make that meaningful, working with local communities, particularly in early help and prevention. So yeah, as far as what we're here for today is concerned, I know that Cabinet colleagues are very aware of how improving children's lives threads through all our portfolios, all the decisions we make. And I'm very grateful for that. And this plan will help us ask the right questions when we are considering things and making decisions. And I know you're all really committed to this improvement, so thank you for that. We're in a new phase now, there's a positive energy, and today's the day that we can endorse and embrace the plan. Everything's in place now and we can move forwards together. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Toynbee. So I will now put this to the vote. The recommendation is that a Cabinet note the activity undertaken to inform and develop our strategic and operational plans, and B, Cabinet endorse the strategic plan accepted by the independently chaired Improvement Board on the 11th of October in order that it can be presented to the Department for Education in compliance with the non-statutory improvement notice. So if you'd like to vote in the room, all in favour? Thank you. That is passed. I'd like just to make some closing remarks before we move on to the next subject. First, I would like to take the opportunity to thank all those who've been involved in the writing of this plan. It has been a team effort, and in the same way, the delivery is dependent on a team effort. I trust that this is a watershed moment and that we can now start looking forward rather than back. There will be bumps on the road, which will make the potential to take us off course, but I, the Chief Executive, Councillor Toynbee, and the Interim Director of Children's Services are determined to get this right. We owe this to the children in our care who have been let down for so long. I've said that delivery requires a team effort. That means throughout the council and with partner organisations. Most specifically, it requires an extraordinary effort from our dedicated social workers. I commend those who have stayed with us. You have not chosen the easy path. We thank you. There will be rewards for you as the outcomes for children improve. And my hope is that within a few years, Herefordshire will be recognised as a council that social workers will recognise as a beacon of best practice. And in the words of the plan, creating a culture where excellent practice can thrive. My appeal is also to the communities we have in Herefordshire. Social workers can only do so much. We need to strengthen families and also the communities in which we all live and work. This will be challenging given the current economic climate and is dependent on effective partnerships throughout the county. So I also commend the thousands of volunteers in our communities who work so hard and are such a vital part of our county. I believe this administration has shown a willingness to listen to our communities. Had voices been louder in the past, and had there been a more listening ear, maybe we would not be where we are now. My door is always open, and my request to every social worker and every partner organisation is to contact me if you have any concerns. Between me and the Chief Executive, we will listen and do our best to address issues. It is clear from reports I've read that we have not been listening well enough to the voices of the children in our care. I realised as I prepared these that I have fallen into something of a trap. I have offered to listen to social workers and organisations, but have not mentioned the children themselves. I can only hear the voices of children by speaking to and listening to them. So this must be part of my and our commitment. It may be harder for children to come to my open door, but I will be working directly with the Director of Children's to see how this can be achieved. My thanks to the Cabinet for approving this plan today. Thank you. We now move on to item 7, approve a preferred option for the development of a new care facility in Herefordshire for meeting further demand and service delivery. And this is to approve the preferred option to invest in and develop the council's own care facility in Herefordshire to meet future demand. The item begins on page 87 of the agenda pack, and I'll pass over to Councillor Crockett, Cabinet Member Health and Adult Wellbeing.
Thank you, Leader. First of all, I'd like to thank Cabinet members for their flexibility when difficult situations arise. I too, like the Leader, am self-isolating. This is because I got pinged this morning and I'm awaiting my PCR result. I thank you for this important opportunity that I fully endorse. This concept was first discussed 2 years ago, so I'm really pleased that it's here today. This is a review of options for establishing additional care home capacity to meet future need of Herefordshire. Demographic changes in the county's population and the evolution of the local care market show that we have high quality care that is needed for older and disabled people with increasingly complex needs. We need 80 additional beds delivered in a way that assures the council of their availability and quality. Before you, you have 5 options. Of these, 3 involve the development of new or extended buildings and facilities, and consequently, significant capital investment. Cabinet is asked to select a preferred option for further exploration and development. In my opinion, option 4 is recommended for consideration. This involves the council developing, building and operating its own 80-bed care facility on a single site. If a preferred option is chosen, next steps will include a detailed business case, a review of possible sites, and the initial stakeholder engagement. Hopefully, these will happen at pace. It is also recommended that a similar option appraisal approach is adopted, developing care and accommodation capacity for other user groups. This includes children and young people. We have with us today Director for Adults and Communities, Mr. Paul Smith, and I will hand over to him to add any further comments, if that's okay, Leader.
Yes, please do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Crockett.
Yeah.
Paul. Good afternoon. I'm Paul Smith from the Acting Director for Adults and Communities. Just to add to Councillor Crockett's summary of the paper and the recommendation, we've undertaken an extensive options appraisal. We have met regularly with the market, and in 2020 we produced a market position statement, which is a publicly available document stating our direction of travel, which is to have a mixed economy of care facilities, both using the independent sector but also progressing our own care facility with a capital scheme that was approved by council in 2020. The economics of care homes lead us to believe, based on research and evidence, that an 80-bed is both economic to run and extensive enough to continue to provide care at the level required within Herefordshire. Councillors and the public may or may not be aware, we have had an incident of a care home closure quite recently, and previous to that we had a care home closure linked to the floods in February 2020. The inventory of accommodation needs to be replaced, and of course, in order to do this, we have various options which have been considered. The option that we have recommended is that we build and run this care facility ourselves. Of course, the council has past expertise in this area and is a growing provider of services within Herefordshire. We have recently insourced a service back into the council that had previously been outsourced approximately 5 years ago, and we have Hoople Care and the council running Hillside Care Centre already. So we have experience and a track record in this particular market. If there are any questions for myself or Councillor Crockett, of course, we're very happy to respond to them, but I would hope that the recommendation put forward by Councillor Crockett is supported today.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Davis, you have your hand up.
I do indeed. This is exciting, right? This is really good news, and I know it was one of the first things that was on our agenda when we came together for the first time as cabinet, looking at interventions we needed to make into social care where the market wasn't delivering. So it's travelled on since then, and now we're talking about building the highest spec build, the passive house standard of these buildings. And for me, this is why I get super excited, and I'm sure I'll get told off for being far too happy in a cabinet meeting, is that we're now talking about that we've got people who may be funded by central government, by ourselves, etc., for their care, being able to live in the same standard as people that are self-funding, and that means a lot. That means that it doesn't matter where you get your money to be able to stay in a care home, we will look after you and you will have the best possible circumstances. So I'm absolutely thrilled to see this one on here. Paul, commendation to you and to Ewan for doing so much for equalities work within reports and making sure that where we are improving the living standards for people, that it's clearly pointed out within the report. So I'd like to thank you for that. It's very rare that we say that we're going to be doing things that are absolutely going to be improving those standards for older people. So it's great to see that on there and more of that shouting about it. This isn't really a question for you, Councillor Crockett, or for Paul, and I'm not sure who it's really for. It might actually be our chief exec, but I'm really interested, and I'm sure a number of people will be, about option C, that a similar options appraisal for the new care home or accommodation for children is prepared for Cabinet's consideration, and whether or not some more information could be given at this opportunity.
Thank you. Yeah, I think for me, option C is an important part of this report, and that I think it recognises that the council is thinking and looking ahead in terms of the needs of a specific care home for children, and that we work out as part of the feasibility study how best to undertake that work, whether as a separate piece of work or whether as to include it in the overarching feasibility study for care home facilities for both adults and children's across the county. So it's an immediate piece of work for us to consider as part of the scope of the study to be undertaken. But I think it's a good indication of the strategic nature of this particular development and the strategic thinking that's in place to take care of both the needs of children and adults in the future and the role of the local authority in providing that accommodation. Hope that helps.
I think it does. I think it was just for me that somebody might say, why on earth have we got something about children's services in a report about an adult social care home? So hopefully that will clarify things for people that may be confused as to why that's there. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any questions, comments? Councillor Harvey.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Again, wanting to highlight the section on resource implications. Social care, and particularly adult social care, is a huge part of this council's spending. It's a statutory responsibility that we have, and it is a pressure which is only building for us as we prepare to provide services in the future for an ageing population. I'm really pleased that we are considering getting back into the care market, and I'm fully supportive of the proposal that we go with option 4 in looking at this in more detail. I commend the work that Paul Smith and his team have done in preparing this options appraisal. It's a very thorough piece of work. And I'm equally supportive of a very similar approach being taken to look at whether we should also be considering getting back into providing residential care for our young people. This will be a significant investment if we go ahead and make it, and it's important that we do the homework and make sure that we're making the right decisions. We're picking the right size of facility to build so that it is economic to operate, and that we are choosing to locate it in a place which best serves the emerging need for our residents for the future. Very pleased to support this report. Great to see it before us. Happy with option 4 and looking forward to having something similar to look at for our children.
Councillor Chowns.
Remembered not to unmute myself just then. Back before likewise, echo the comments Liz made in terms of all credit to Paul and his team for a really comprehensive report. I also fully support option 4. I think that's excellent direction for us as a county, and I'm particularly pleased also that, as this report makes clear, we will be using the Herefordshire Future Home Standards for this home as well. Really putting into practice the principles that we stand behind and recognising that, as it says somewhere in the report, sustainability is about kind of ensuring that developments are done in a way that is compatible with everybody's future health and well-being. So really welcome this. Thank you.
Paul, could it's 80 places in the context of a growing elderly population. That doesn't sound to be a particularly significant intervention. Can you either reassure me that it is a significant, or or maybe it's small, so then it's less risky? What are our plans for the future? What proportion does it represent of the needs in the county?
Thank you, Leader. 80 beds is approximately 10% of the council commissioned work. Across Herefordshire, there are over 1,600 bed-based placements, but of course the council is not even 50% of the market, which is quite unusual. Many parts of the West Midlands, the council represents north of 80%. So it's an unusual market within Herefordshire. The home that we lost due to flooding in 2020 and the home that we've recently lost, unfortunately, because the charity wished to cease providing the service, come to around 60 beds. So this replaces them and increases our capacity by a further around 20. I believe that the direction of travel in the future will be that as we move towards an even further mixed economy, there may be further capital schemes that come forward for future care facilities, both in the adults and the children's service areas. And in relation to the earlier point, of course, particularly from a commissioning perspective and from a council perspective, we are now truly looking at things from an all age. So there will be many reports perhaps that come forward around these sorts of matters that are both children's and adults combined, because that's a very sensible and pragmatic and both practical approach for a council that is becoming more converged in terms of its directorate's approach to these matters. Of course, the feasibility on both of these type of facilities is very similar, so it makes sense economically to perhaps do both jobs at the same time. And I believe that the capacity we will create will satisfy our immediate requirements, but I would suggest that going forward we may wish to come forward with a further scheme, or possibly even a further 2, to build more care facilities in the future, because as we become growingly assured and mature in our delivery of these services, of course it is a consideration we should always put on the agenda. That's not to suggest that we don't welcome further sustainable development from private operators, because we absolutely do wish to have a mixed economy. And as long as new developments meet the environmental requirements of the county, then of course we would consider and support them and welcome them, I'm sure.
Thank you. I think I'll move on then, if I may, to group leaders. I think Councillor James.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I too would support option 4, but caution over the costing about management of the facilities like that. I'm old enough to remember what happened when the county used to operate care homes throughout the county of Hereford and Worcester, and usually the staffing costs were somewhere between 50 and 100% more expensive than the private operators were able to do. That was largely because of some of the structures that were in place, agreements, etc. I won't go into the details in public, but they were pretty horrendous, and there were costs 30 years ago per head that would be considered about what they are now. they were so expensive, some of the homes the local authorities operated. But the principle, I think, is right, as long as we're able to manage them at a cost-effective way. So often local authorities make them very, very expensive to operate. We need more facilities like this, and the ownership of those facilities is important. And there's a danger at the moment that a operator may drop suddenly, a private operator may suddenly drop out of the market and decide that the premises they have is better suited to some alternative use, and that will leave the council in a pretty precarious, and social care in the county a precarious position. So I wholeheartedly support the principle of this, but caution against the costs that may occur in the running of some of these operations. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor James. I think this is just the first stage, isn't it, of looking at it. I think further governance decisions will have to be made and looked at once the feasibility study has been prepared. Councillor Ginman.
Thank you, Leader. On behalf of the Independents for Herefordshire, I think we welcome what's happening here. We're mindful that under the Care Act of 2014, we have a duty as a council, as a local authority, to ensure that we are looking forward, we are considering what should happen to what has to be said in Herefordshire is an increasing or a higher demographic number of older people. So it is important that we are seen to be looking at this sort of problem and how we're going to deal with it. I do think it is very important that we learn from the failures where those homes have closed, because only by learning what went wrong with them, many of them, can we actually ensure that we meet the challenges that are coming up. One of the key ones has been mentioned, and I think it is important that this would be a new building where energy considerations would be paramount. One of the key failure reasons is so often that residential homes have tried to be built on old buildings, which are well nigh impossible to heat to the sort of standard and level that older people need and demand and would expect. So learning lessons from failures is really important. One question that has arisen is trying to understand the balance between short-term and long-term residential care against the backdrop of the administration of government's statements, both this and the past one, with regard to trying to ensure care in the community, to keep people in their own homes. I'd be grateful if indeed Paul Smith could perhaps just indicate a little around that thinking, because I think that is important in terms of thinking of numbers. But fundamentally, this is a good idea. It should be explored. The facts and figures quite rightly have got to be gone through. It isn't just building them, it's running them that has been the death knell of many of them, and indeed has been the biggest problem for many recently. But I'd be grateful for consideration of that particular question. Thank you.
Yeah, Paul.
Thank you, Councillor. I can address both the previous point and this point in the same response, if I may. Of course, we already do run a care home in Hillside very successfully. That was commissioned incredibly quickly during the pandemic as a response to the closure of the flood hit provider, unfortunately, that had to close. So we do have an understanding of the finances of running a care facility, and I can confirm that the running cost of Hillside are comparable with many players and many partners within the private sector care home delivery. So we do have an understanding of that. But of course, our larger premises is a different financial animal. We understand the economics of a care home. We have done extensive research with care facilities that have been built in other cities and other counties across England over the last 2 years. I have personal experience of working for a care provider in a previous role. And the economics tend to be based on multiples of 5 and multiples of 8, which is why 80 is a round number that works. Of course, if you have 80 dwellings, you only need one registered manager. If you have 50 dwellings, you still need one registered manager. And some of the homes that have failed in the past and perhaps may fail in the future in other counties are based on the economics of size. And as Councillor Ginman absolutely rightly pointed out, also the structure and fabric of the building. Any building that the council develops would of course be to the highest environmental standards, would be hugely insulated to the current regulations, and would of course be much more cost effective and environmentally friendly in terms of the heating cost of a very large building. The cost of heating a Victorian building that has been continually enhanced and expanded is incredibly expensive and can be the difference between a home being sustainable and being unsustainable. In addition to that, because the council would be running this facility and be in control somewhat of its own destiny, of course, occupancy within care homes is a true factor of sustainability. Care homes generally need to run at various levels of occupancy to remain sustainable. The county and the council would be in control of that occupancy because it would be in control and running the care facility itself. Of course, we would welcome self-funders in addition to council-funded individuals to create a mixed economy, and it does create a level playing field within a market where there is some disparity, particularly in Herefordshire, where the market is predominantly self-funders, which is unusual. In terms of running this home going forward, should we get as far as that, and of course, the proposal today is to explore the business case and feasibility to do so, both for adults and a children's facility. Of course, we would come back with detailed business cases to ensure that Cabinet were cited and opposition politicians also had the ability via scrutiny and Cabinet to scrutinise our numbers and to ensure that the business was sustainable in the long term. In relation to the previous costs of running care facilities and a relevant point, that councils did struggle in the past to be affordable and sustainable when running care facilities. Of course, we have learnt the lessons from the past, as have many councils in England and the wider UK. Many councils in the West Midlands are already in the process of or considering creating and building their own care facilities. There is a definite market direction of travel in this direction. And we have spoken to our colleagues in the West Midlands. I have a very good network within the Association of Directors of Adults about the facilities, how they are running them, the effectiveness, the business cases, etc. And of course, we will present that back to Cabinet at a future point to ensure that if the council pursued its own facility, it was only on a sustainable business case, both from a financial, commercial and environmental perspective, because of course, that's how this facility remains an asset for the community for the next 30 to 40 years, which should be the life of a care facility. I hope that addresses your point, Councillor Ginman, and to some extent, Councillor.
Thank you very much. I mean, my last point, which was the one on short-term against long-term, against care in the community, care in the home. Would you like just to comment on that?
Yes, Councillor Ginman. At the moment, the council has approximately 800 people receiving care in the community, and a very similar number to people within bed-based care. And that is a very stable number. It doesn't alter that much throughout the year. And that does allow us to plan very well and to forecast our budgets extremely accurately. We do, of course, have a direction of travel known as Home First, and we predominantly wish to provide care within people's homes as opposed to within traditional care facilities. We do believe, however, from the emerging demographic, that care facilities that are accommodation-based will always continue to be required, but perhaps on a different basis than have been in the past. Care facilities now need to be an active part of the community. It is highly likely that care facilities may include some public space, some retail on the ground floor perhaps, and in this design there is even the suggestion of perhaps care facilities that could include things such as a creche to encourage staff who may wish to work in the facility and have childcare needs, which is a huge advantage in many care facilities across England and the UK. So there is a very different design. And in terms of our approach, of course, our preference is care in the community, but we believe there is a mixed economy that will continue to be required. And the market position statement that we published in 2020 does detail this as our direction of travel. And of course, all of our demographic information and our demand information which this proposal is based upon links into the JSNA that we'll be discussing in the next few weeks, and links into the emerging demographics and the trends linked to lots of research and data around Herefordshire as an individual county.
Thank you very much for that very full response, which I think was extremely helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Matthews.
Yeah, Paul went on for so long, leader, I've forgotten what I was going to say. Now,
okay, moving swiftly on.
The two independents are strongly behind following option 4. Councillor Crockett knows, because I worked with her in the early stages on Hillside, and provided the sound business case is made and we get value for money. That's the important thing. It's no good throwing money at these things unless it's done properly on a proper business footing, and then we get a proper value for money return. So subject to that, we're very much behind option 4. I look at option 3, but we mustn't take our eye off that, because if acquiring a property, if something suddenly came on the market that could be brought up to date and it could be purchased at the right money, well, you mustn't take your eye off the ball there, But generally, as I said, our views are and support is with option 4, subject to what I said, that we look at it very carefully and make sure that we get value for money all the way down the line. Well, and at the same time, keep an open option for 3 if something should suddenly pop up. One thing I could ask Paul, I'm surprised for the report to say that we have few suitable sites available, which is council's ownership and blum, 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 blum. I would have thought that we had, land about that we could utilize for this purpose. Are you absolutely adamant that there's very few opportunities for that?
Thank you, Councillor. We've certainly done some initial research around possible sites, and of course, a plot of land of the right size may be readily available, perhaps within the council's ownership, but of course that site needs to be in the right place demographically and geographically. So it is much more about the location of the site rather than the size of the site. We believe that the care facility needs to be accessible initially to perhaps Hereford City, but of course that's not a prerequisite. It needs to be decided as part of the feasibility and options appraisal. And so there are limited sites available based on the knowledge we have to date, and location and geographic location is the most important factor rather than purely size of site. So again, of course, a part of the business case will come forward should this be approved today. We will explore all opportunities for sites and come forward with those as part of the options appraisal and business case that is delivered.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Leader. Yes. Again, please don't shoot the messenger. The group as a whole, I wasn't able to say that we're fully able to endorse option 4, but that's not to say that we don't fully endorse the need for such a facility within the county. And I think when plans to develop Hillside were prepared by the previous administration, officers then were adamant that the facility was too small to fully benefit from the economies of scale, which would be delivered by a much bigger facility. And I think that the figure of 80 was banded about then, so it sounds about right in size. And I think what was uncertain then was the demand for that number of beds, and the effect on the very successful privately owned care homes in the county if they lost council-funded contracts for accommodation. And it's worth bearing in mind that, as we've heard, 76% of those are rated, by the CQC at 76% are rated at good or excellent in terms of the provision that they provide. And I think for the Conservative group, the further consideration comes in respect of the responsibility for staffing and running what is effectively a partially clinical facility with nursing qualified staff. And I've heard what Paul has said, but you know, historically, I don't, from my experience, don't think the council's really experienced in that field, and I think that then leads to some risks, especially relating to the recruitment, training and retention of care home staff at all the levels that will be required in such a large facility. And the feeling is from the group that the risk might be mitigated with partnering with an established care home operator rather than sort of going it alone. And I can see that officers have partially considered this, but really they seem to have centred on the Shaw care home contract, and nothing to do with me, in terms of what that would look like. And I'm adamant really that there are all kinds of risk and profit sharing options open, which perhaps ought to be thought about. The measurement, the other factor, I suppose, is the announcement of such an investment by the council has a risk of being sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy in respect of investment in the county by private care homes and care home providers. In effect, that the council's entry risks distorting the market. And I think it would be prudent if, when the business case is undertaken, that element is thought about by officers. In respect to the facility itself, reading the reports, I think what became evident was that the learning disability elements have seen the highest cost increase, and they are the 57% of the residential spend of the county, 57%. So there's a question here whether the long-term 57% should be dealt with or looked at by this facility, or whether the shorter term element, which is the complex needs of the over 85s, which will have a shorter residential stay in occupancy, should be the key element for this facility, or is it partially some of the same? But I think if we're looking for economies of scale, if we're looking for value for money to the council, we need to be adamant what this facility really will be used for. And there is a danger in sort of trying to create a generalist facility that can be used for many different things, because that isn't going to achieve the economies of scale that I think we're looking for. And I just think that the business case needs to sort of take that on board as well. In regard to a recommendation C, yes, that was a puzzle to me as well. It's kind of evidenced by the report in a single paragraph, paragraph 12, I think. And I wasn't sure, it's a great idea. I wasn't sure why it needed a recommendation from Cabinet in order that an options paper comes forward from officers. I think Cabinet's quite capable of asking for an options paper, and constitutionally it doesn't need to be a recommendation. But again, perhaps I've been in audit and governance too long and getting swayed by that. So those are the only points I'd like to make, and hopefully they're viewed as constructive, partially anyway. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. I guess there's a bit of a philosophical difference, isn't there, with market intervention and all that. One of the early understanding I had was that this facility might be used as a training facility, so it'd be a kind of exemplar for the county. So we would expect people to come and go and move on to other homes, but of the highest possible standards. So we're investing in the future of the county as much as it being a facility for old people. So if we can develop that, I think that's one aspect, I think. So I'll move on then to Councillor Fagan.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. And the Greens certainly welcome the investigation of these options. Response to the needs of the most vulnerable in our society, and I think that we're reaching a point where we realise that the market market failure can actually leave the most vulnerable people sort of at sea. So it's important that we do look at this properly. And also I was sort of welcoming Paul Smith's speaking about the experiences of other councils and looking at how facilities like this are run, and just making sure that we sort of build on good practice and experiences elsewhere. I just wanted to point out that in terms of the environmental considerations, I mean, fuel poverty is one of the highest indices of deprivation within the county, and so actually making sure that any facilities that we do develop actually take into account environmental considerations, so that fuel poverty is one of the issues that is addressed. It would surely be better for all the residents of Herefordshire who may pass through these facilities. So, you know, on the whole, we welcome this as a step forward in terms of developing social value in the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fagan. So, Councillor Crockett, do you want to comment on anything that's been said?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Matthews for reminding me about your early support in this venture. And I'm glad that you are in the same direction as us in that regard. I'm also glad to hear that the concept was considered by the previous administration. And at last, we're all singing from the same hymn sheet. So with that, I thank you all. I would like to thank Paul and Ewan and the officers that have been involved in this. It's still a lot of work to do, and I look forward to bringing this back to you once all the studies have been completed. And I hope that will be at pace. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Crockett. Unless I've got anything wrong, I think we can move to the recommendation. Just one. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay, so recommendation is that A, having considered the options appraisal for further development of additional care homes facilities in Herefordshire, Cabinet approves option 4. Second, the authority is delegated to the Interim Director for Adults and Communities to take all appropriate steps to develop the preferred option in detail for further consideration of Cabinet, and C, a similar options appraisal for new care home or other accommodation for children is prepared for Cabinet's consideration. So if I can put that to the vote of those in the room, all those in favour, if you'd mind raising your hands. Thank you very much. That's agreed unanimously. So thank you for your time this afternoon. Next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, the 18th of November. And please can I have confirmation the live stream has been stopped?